In this video, I'm going to talk with Katie Smith, founder of Bilateral Base, an online platform for EMDR therapists. Katie is a relational EMDR therapist, and she's in the last phases of writing her dissertation. So we will talk a little bit about that. We will talk about the pros and cons of doing EMDR virtually and some exciting news from Bilateral Base. So if you're an EMDR therapist, take a look. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the Online
Hi.
Science of the EMDR.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So you are the founder of Bilateral Base. So tell me a little bit about Bilateral Base and how you came up with the idea to start Bilateral Base.
Okay. So I did my basic EMDR training I think I started it about 4 years ago. And after I'd done the first couple of parts, I was looking into get some equipment, a light bar, because doing obviously the traditional manual method of BLS is
that hurts
my shoulder
a lot.
would clunk. Yeah, and then my clients would end up looking after me. So I wanted to look into getting some equipment. And there just seemed to be a bit of a gap in the market there. The equipment was super expensive, actually, which I think is a bit out of reach of quite a lot of, in the UK, NHS workers, who are potentially not paid as much as private therapists. And I'd got a few colleagues who'd been working with the equipment that was available, and there were issues with breakages and this kind of thing. Yeah. So I thought maybe I can do something different, and I got together with a team of engineers and various different people to put together some physical hardware that was, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel, but just doing it a little bit better using Bluetooth technology rather than wires that come out and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we'd progressed quite a lot with that, and then obviously at the beginning of last year the pandemic started, and we thought, well, nobody's going to be using this stuff at the moment. We can't work in person with clients. So that's when we developed the online version, which we call Reach, with the online light bar and on audio as well, and soon to be tactile units. In the next few weeks we'll have the buzzers available.
Yes, I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to checking them out.
Yes.
So since we are recording this on Bilateral Base, I was wondering if you want to show how it works.
Yes, absolutely. So can my mouse be seen? Can my mouse be seen be moving from? No, it can't. Okay. So just to describe what I'm looking at, on the bottom left-hand side of the screen is the main control box for the bilateral stimulation, with a big blue button which says Start BLS. Mm-hmm. So that controls each of the different types of bilateral stimulation in terms of the speed and the on and off. Mm-hmm. And on that control box you can see how many sets, the number of sets you've used in a session, and also the amount of passes used in the current set. So then if you go down and open with this toggle on the top right hand corner, the light bar box.
Okay, so now I see the light popped on my screen now, because I'm in the client. I have the client view.
Yes, okay. So from the therapist view, you will see the light bar, but it will be more faded than it is for the client.
Yeah.
And then you can change the colour.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got red, yellow, green. We've got this one, not that one. That one, which is called the retro light bar. So that's kind of the other way around. And you can either use the light bar in sweep mode or blink mode. So I'm going to show you in sweep mode, and let's go for the blue light bar.
Okay.
So there we go. Okay. Now, just to explain, can people be able to see your side in terms of the screen going off, or should I just explain that?
Just my side, yeah. So just the client side. So not all the features that you have to control the color and change the speed. It's just the ball moving on the screen, like the client.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like the client. Okay. So on the client side, we had quite a lot of. Let me just stop that. Otherwise, we might both start processing. We had quite a lot of feedback from our therapists that were using Bilateral Base, because initially we had the light bar coming up above the video of the therapist, but some clients felt a bit difficult with that and felt a bit kind of too watched. So what we've done is we've changed it to when the light bar comes on, the therapist's image kind of fades out for the client, and there's just a blue background, and then comes back on when the BLS is paused.
Mm-hmm.
Most people seem to prefer that, but actually with potentially with more vulnerable or more complex clients, they need to see the therapist's face. They need that continual relational exchange. So we've got a feature that you can change it. You can have the therapist's face there. It's just by clicking the camera icon.
Mm-hmm.
And what Bilateral Base will do for each of your clients, it will remember the settings for that client. So when it comes back on, the speed, the colour, whether the therapist appears or not, will all remain the same. So you don't have to go back and redo them all.
Yeah, no, these are great features. And you, in your training, you're a relational therapist, right?
That's right. My initial training was as a relational integrative psychotherapist.
Mm-hmm. And how do you integrate it into your EMDR work?
Well, interestingly, I'm just finishing a doctorate, and that my research was around how integrative psychotherapists use EMDR as part of their practice, and I'm just writing up the results at the moment. And actually, I think the way that people with this particular training, and I'm very mindful that it's a relatively small sample and it's only from one piece of research, but people with with an integrative training that were my research participants, and certainly I do this as well, use EMDR in a way that is very similar to the integrative training. And I've come up with what I call the 4 C's, which integrative therapists use when working in this way. One is connection, the relational piece.
Of course,
curiosity. What's this client about? Case conceptualization is so important. Right. And creativity. And what I've found is that lots of people use EMDR in a very creative, very imaginal way. So healing those attachment wounds, through the imaginal process. So I guess it's a little bit it's not changing the standard protocol, but it's using the existing training around that and being creative with it.
Yeah. So you're in the final stages of your publishing your dissertation. I
am. The final long stages of writing it up, which is much harder than I ever thought.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about the pros and cons of working online virtually versus, as a relational therapist. I know how, many of us put so much emphasis on, connecting with the client, being with the client in the same space, how important it is. And now we're in a pandemic and we had to, change the way we work. So how do you see that, these pros and cons of working virtually versus working in person?
Sure. I think that firstly, when we first all had to make this very, very sudden switch, to online working, it was almost overnight, wasn't it, that we all had to start working online. And I think at the time, a big factor in terms of the client's comfort was the therapist's discomfort, and because we weren't used to working online. the therapist would be, would be a little bit, anxious about it, and that was conveyed to the client. I think now that we're all much more used to it, that's not so much of a factor.
Yeah.
But I do, it is, looking, I work a lot with the body, and I notice what clients are doing with their bodies, and that's, I can see myself in the picture now, and you can see my hands, you can see my face, but you can't see whether I'm tapping my feet, and you can't see perhaps as well whether I'm holding my breath or breathing, breathing in a shallow way, or maybe so, the subtleties may be different. On the other hand, you're sitting much closer in many ways than you would be with a client in the room. They might be 3 or 4 meters away, whereas it feels like you're about 2 feet away, from me. And so you can potentially see more of the subtleties in a different way. I've had some very interesting experiences with clients working online one client in particular, and he gave me his full permission to talk about this because he thought it was really impactful for him. And I've been working with him in person for a couple of months about some really difficult childhood sexual abuse. And when we started working online, he had big noise-cancelling headphones, and the progress we made was so impactful. And he came to me and reflected back to me, and he said, when we were sitting in the same room together, there was always a kind of interruption to the process because my voice was coming from the other side of the room. But he said that actually, and we were working in quite an imaginal way, kind of trying to rewire the past effectively, or rewire the brain in response to the past experiences. And he said that with the headphones on, and he always had his eyes closed. In fact, he started using an aeroplane mask to block out everything. And that he had, we used audio BLS, and he had my voice, the audio BLS, and what he called the EMDR, the processing, which he always said was like a Rolodex, and it was flick through, and it was all inside his head. And he just was fully immersed in this processing experience, and just found it much more effective actually working in that way.
Yeah, one of the things that we had to consider here, and I'm sure you had the same thing in England, is that we had to be with the client in the same space, but then we had to wear a mask, and the client wears a mask, so we're missing a lot of these facial expressions and cues, and so it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's just that it's a complicated situation, and and you're on lockdown right now anyway, so you have don't have a choice.
No, I mean I've got some colleagues who are still working in person if they're working inpatient units, but they have to wear full PPE. And I think I was talking to a colleague at a training I was doing over the weekend, and she was saying actually that she feels it's a more intimate experience working online with someone now than in PPE. And obviously, like you say, we do what we can, but it's hard. I think it's particularly hard working in PPE in person.
Yeah. Okay, I want to ask you one more question, Katie, and this is a question I'm going to ask every person. And the question is, how do we get better? How do EMDR therapists get better at what we do? Obviously, there's a learning curve in EMDR, and we have to learn a lot. So how do we get better at it?
Wow. So I think I mentioned I was doing a training workshop this weekend, which is a sort of advanced EMDR training, and it looks at what happens beyond standard protocol, not changing the standard protocol, but actually integrating more therapists' kind of initial training with that. So the person I work with is called Mark Brain, and he has his training is called Unleash Your EMDR, and it's effectively an integrative attachment informed training. So it looks at where the dysfunction originated from, and I think that training beyond the basic training is so short. It's what I can't remember exactly how many, but three very short sections. And I think a lot of people, and I certainly did, finish the basic training. I thought, oh my goodness, I feel by myself. I don't really know how to use this, in comparison with the 5 years of psychotherapy training that I did. And I think how to get better is keep training, do advanced trainings, but also work with other clinicians. So the training that we did at the weekend, we really encouraged the participants to kind of team up, and after each workshop we have participants that sort of, they form a group and they meet like once a month and do a triad between them, and sometimes the facilitators from Unleash will come and drop in and see how they're doing and that kind of thing. But actually witnessing how other people work and being a client, because I'm always surprised how few EMDR therapists have had more than the EMDR they've received. Yeah, and I think that's super important. I've had quite a lot, and from various different people, and I've learned so much from being the patient, and having that experience. So I think, colleagues experiencing EMDR yourself, and just experimenting, and never seeing the process as being static.
All right, Katie, thank you so much for taking the time to talking to me today.
Sure.
And looking forward to getting some more news from Bilateral Base. I'm excited about the buzzer.
Yes. Yep, we'll definitely keep everyone updated.
All right, thank you
They
so
should
much.
be here soon. Thank you for having me.